Good Monday. This is Jay Brew, co-chairman of Seafried & Brew. What we want to talk about today is the moving up of Tier 1 capital. When we look at community banks across the country, over the past many years as we move past the financial crisis, going through the Great Recession, then preparing for what would come with Basel III, is that we've seen Tier 1 leverage just constantly moving up in here. Over the last year, from 9.78% up to 9.98% last quarter. This capital move up in the national benchmark, which represents community banks between 100 million and 5 billion, suggests that maybe based upon the risk that the overall community banking industry is taking, would suggest that maybe banks have too much capital in here. And when you look at it based upon where banks were previously, once again, they wanted to cover any risks that they could. But when we look at it on an overall basis going forward, we have to do capital planning as part of our strategic planning. That's why at Seafried & Brew, what we do in our strategic planning model is that we look out over the next 10 years and basically model a bank's balance sheet and income statement, which then of course throws off all of the capital ratios such as Tier 1. And the question is that based upon where a bank is moving out into the future, will capital continue to increase? Should there be planning put into place that capital Tier 1 remains constant, or even that Tier 1 should move down to a certain goal? Once again, this kind of planning is strategic that then throws off what the capital plan can be. And that we find is very, very important in terms of what direction boards want to go with their overall Tier 1 capital. And then what one can look at is that should we take an assumption in terms of maybe having a different growth rate in here and place that into the model and see what that does to capital. Then we can look at dividends, for instance, and when we look at dividends, that should they be increasing in here over time to be able to bring Tier 1 leverage into the goal that the board has set. And with the way that stock prices are for community banks, is that stock buybacks might also be part of what the strategy is. But however we're looking at this, is that we want to be able to plan for the future, not just hoard capital in here. We need, as we talked about in previous webcasts, with the way that return on equity is for the national average at below levels that we've seen in the past, is capital planning becomes very important in terms of honing in on an ROE that's going to be acceptable to shareholders. So when we look at it, capital planning as part of your strategic planning is so very important in here. This is Jay Brew. Have a great week.